My grandfather used to say, "Every tree knows its roots." He'd deliver that line over Sunday pot roast, usually right after he dismissed something I'd said at the table. Something like my opinion on the news, or a question about the family business, or once, memorably, when I was 17, my plan to study finance at university. Finance. He'd laughed, not unkindly, which was almost worse. He looked at my Uncle Randall across the table, and they shared one of those looks. The kind that doesn't need words. My grandmother, Eleanor, had simply reached over and patted my hand. "You'll find your path, Mia," she said. "Something more suitable." I'm Mia Caldwell. I'm 31 years old. I'm a certified financial planner with a decade of experience managing high-net-worth portfolios, and for the past 2 years, I have been the sole reason my grandparents' estate hasn't collapsed under the weight of its own mismanagement. They don't know that yet. Or rather, they didn't. Until the day I sat down across from them in their oak-paneled study, opened my laptop, and showed them exactly what their golden boy had done to their life savings. This is the story of how I went from being the overlooked grandchild told to know her place to the only person standing between my family and financial ruin, and how I chose very deliberately exactly how to use that power. To understand what happened, you need to understand the Caldwell family structure. My grandfather, Harold Caldwell Sr., built a regional trucking company from nothing in the 1970s. By the time I was born, it was a moderately successful operation, and Harold had the personality of a man who believed he'd done everything right because everything had, indeed, gone right. That kind of confidence hardens into something else over decades. It becomes certainty. Then it becomes dismissal of anything that didn't fit his worldview. My grandmother Eleanor was the quiet enforcer. She never raised her voice, never delivered a crushing verdict directly. She'd simply redirect, suggest, imply. "Your cousin Tyler is doing so well in the business, isn't he?" Or, "Harold Jr. says you've been asking a lot of questions again, Mia." She wielded approval like a rationing card, doled out sparingly, withdrawn without warning. The family had a clear hierarchy. At the top, my Uncle Harold Jr., and his son Tyler. Jr. had taken over day-to-day operations of Caldwell Trucking when Grandpa Harold stepped back. Tyler was being groomed as the next generation's standard-bearer. Tyler, who was 3 years older than me, had a business degree from a mid-tier state school and a personality built entirely around being Harold Caldwell's grandson. He drove a truck he couldn't really afford and talked about the family legacy at every holiday dinner, usually while eating food he hadn't contributed to preparing. Then there was my side of the family. My father, Patrick, was Harold's younger son, and by family accounting, the lesser one. He'd left the trucking business to become a high school history teacher, which Grandpa Harold treated as a lifelong act of betrayal. My mother, Sandra, was warm and practical and had long since stopped expecting to be embraced by the Caldwell inner circle. And then there was me, the quiet one, the bookish one, the girl who asked too many questions. I wasn't the scapegoat, exactly. They weren't cruel to me.
It was subtler than that.
I was simply not counted. Not in the conversations about the business. Not in the discussions about the estate. When Grandpa Harold talked about the next generation carrying on, he meant Tyler. Always Tyler. When Grandma Eleanor hosted her monthly family dinners and assigned seats, I was always at the end near the kitchen. Never without reason, always because someone else needed to sit closer, always because the seating just worked out that way. I watched all of this and I learned. I learned what was valued. I learned what was dismissed. And I learned to keep very, very quiet about my own progress. The first incident I think of, the one that set the tone for everything that followed, happened when I was 22. I'd just graduated with honors from a top finance program. I'd landed a position at a wealth management firm downtown. I came to Sunday dinner proud, maybe naively so, hoping Grandpa Harold might finally see me differently. "Finance," he said again, the same word, the same tone. 8 years had passed and nothing had changed. "Well, that's a good field for young women now. Lots of opportunities." He turned to Tyler. "Tyler, tell everyone about the new contract you landed." Tyler talked for 20 minutes. I sat with my announcement dissolving in my chest like paper in rain. The second incident came when I was 25. I'd been promoted to junior advisor. I was managing a small book of clients, doing well, genuinely well, not just by my own estimation, but by the firm's metrics. I made the mistake of mentioning this to Grandma Eleanor over the phone. There was a pause on the line, and then she said, "That's lovely, dear. Have you thought about whether you want to settle down? You know, Tyler's been seeing someone very nice." I got off the phone and sat in my apartment for a long time, looking at the wall. The third incident, and this one stung in a specific way, was at Grandpa Harold's 75th birthday party. It was a big event. Rented hall, catered dinner, extended family from 3 states. My father gave a toast. It was warm and genuine, about his father's work ethic and the way he'd built something from nothing. Harold nodded along, barely looking at him, when Tyler stood up and gave a much louder, much more theatrical toast that was essentially a tribute to himself thinly disguised as a tribute to his grandfather. Harold actually teared up. After dinner, Harold pulled Tyler aside, and they had a long conversation in the corner. I watched from across the room. Later, my Aunt Donna, Junior's wife, who had always been quietly kind to me, leaned over and said, "Your grandfather just told Tyler he's adding him to the estate documents. Something about taking over management of the investments when the time comes." She said it gently, I think trying to soften whatever expression was on my face. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly becoming very good at something specific. I specialized in estate planning and family wealth management. I knew exactly what adding him to the estate documents likely meant, and I knew what questions it should raise.
But I wasn't asked.
I was never asked. The fourth incident was the one that finally cracked something open in me. I was 28. My parents needed help. My father had a health scare, nothing ultimately fatal, but serious enough that they burned through savings, took on some debt. I went to Grandpa Harold not for a handout, but with a proposal, a structured, interest-bearing family loan that I drafted myself, with clear repayment terms, the whole document professional and thorough. He read it over. He nodded slowly. Then he looked up and said, "Well, think about it." He never mentioned it again. 2 months later, I found out through my cousin that Tyler had asked for and received $50,000 to expand some business opportunities. No contract, no repayment terms, no documentation at all. I sat with that knowledge for a long time. I didn't let it make me bitter. I let it make me careful. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in November 2 years ago. I got a call from Aunt Donna. She sounded strange, clipped, careful, like she was choosing every word. "Your grandparents are updating their estate plan," she said. "Your grandfather wanted me to let your father know. There are some changes. Tyler is going to be taking over management of the investment accounts as trustee." "How much is in the accounts?" I asked, keeping my voice even. A pause. "A lot. Your grandfather built up quite a portfolio over the years. And there's the business, of course, and the property." I asked one more question. "Who set this up? What firm is handling it?" She gave me the name. I knew the firm. Not well, but enough. A regional outfit. Not disreputable, but not what I'd call sophisticated. Not the kind of place equipped to handle complex multi-generational estate planning. After I hung up, I sat at my desk for a while, looking at nothing. I thought about my father, who'd spent his whole life loving his parents and being loved back, but always a little less. I thought about my mother, who'd never complained, never made demands. I thought about the loan proposal I drafted with meticulous care that had simply been allowed to disappear. And I thought about Tyler. Tyler, who I genuinely don't believe is malicious. What he is careless and entitled and entirely unequipped for what he was being handed. I knew that not as a guess, but as a professional assessment. Because over the previous year, through a combination of family conversations, overheard discussions, and one very telling holiday visit during which Tyler had drunkenly complained about the ridiculous complexity of the old man's account structure, I had started to piece together a picture of exactly what those investments looked like. And the picture was not good. I thought about all of this, and then I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a revenge fantasy. A practical one. I was going to do my job. I was going to do it exceptionally well. and I was going to let the results speak. I called Grandpa Harold the next day and told him I'd heard about the estate updates. I told him I was glad the family was being looked after. And then, very calmly, I said, "If you ever want a second opinion on the investment structure, no pressure, no cost, I'd be happy to take a look. That's what I do." There was a long silence. Then, Tyler's handling it, Mia.
Of course, I said.
The offer stands. I want to be honest about what happened next because I don't want you to think I went in looking for ammunition. I went in looking to help. The two things just happened to produce the same information. 6 months after that call, Grandpa Harold had a minor stroke. It wasn't devastating, but it was frightening enough that the family gathered, and frightening enough that Harold, who was proud but not stupid, started thinking hard about his affairs. Aunt Donna, who had quietly become something of an ally over the years, called me.
"He's worried," she said.
He doesn't want to say it out loud, but he's worried about the accounts. Tyler's been making some decisions, and I just think someone else should look.
I came.
I told Harold it was a family visit. I brought food. I sat with him and Eleanor for an afternoon and didn't mention money at all. Before I left, he stopped me in the hallway. "You still doing that work?" he asked. "The financial advising?" "Yes," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. "Tyler's been changing things around. Moving things. I don't always follow what he's saying when he explains it." He looked at the wall, not at me. "You said you'd take a look." "I'll take a look," I said. What I found, and I'm going to keep this clear and factual because the facts are enough, was a picture of profound mismanagement. Tyler had been given trustee access to investment accounts representing approximately $2.3 million in retirement and estate assets. Over 18 months, he had made a series of moves that reflected either a fundamental misunderstanding of portfolio management or a reckless disregard for risk tolerance appropriate to retirees in their mid-70s. He had shifted a substantial portion out of diversified, low-risk holdings and into a concentrated position in a sector that had performed poorly, a sector that, I recognized immediately, was adjacent to some business opportunities. Tyler had mentioned in passing at Christmas. He had also, I discovered upon reviewing the full documentation, taken a trustee fee that was not clearly authorized by the trust documents. Not a dramatic theft, but not nothing either. $12,000 over the previous year, paid to himself from the account. I sat with all of this information for a week. I ran the numbers multiple times. I had a colleague, someone I trusted, someone who had no connection to my family, review my analysis without identifying any of the parties. She confirmed everything I had found and used the word actionable more than once. I could have gone straight to my grandparents. I could have gone to a lawyer. I could have gone to Tyler himself. I thought about it carefully, and I made another decision. I was going to present this the right way. Not as an accusation, not as a family drama, but as a professional financial review. I was going to do it in a meeting with documentation, and I was going to be completely calm. Because my grandparents had spent decades not seeing me clearly. I wasn't going to give them any reason to dismiss what I was about to show them. I spent 3 weeks preparing a full estate analysis report, current portfolio status, performance benchmarks, risk assessment, and a forward-looking recommendation package. I got it reviewed again. I had it bound. I made 3 copies. Then I called Grandpa Harold and asked for a meeting. He assumed it was going to be a general conversation, me offering some suggestions, maybe talking through broad strokes. He told Junior, who told Tyler, and Tyler called me 2 days before the meeting. "Hey, Mia." His voice was easy, the way it always was. Tyler was never genuinely worried about anything, because he never had to be. "I heard you're coming to talk to Grandpa about the accounts." "That's right," I said. "I mean, that's cool if you want to take a look, but I've got it pretty well handled. I've been doing a lot of research." "I'm sure you have," I said. "It'll be a good conversation." Brief pause. "You know they set this up for me to manage, right? Like, that was the whole plan." "Tyler," I said, and I kept my voice perfectly pleasant. "I'm just doing a review. That's all."
He seemed satisfied with that.
He shouldn't have been. I drove to my grandparents' house on a Thursday afternoon in April. The weather was cold and bright. I remember the light through the windshield very clearly, that sharp early spring light that makes everything look slightly exposed. I sat in the car for a few minutes before I went in, not because I was nervous, because I wanted to be completely composed. I wanted to be the most professional version of myself I'd ever been. I wanted them to see, for the first time, and without any possible ambiguity, exactly who I was. Junior was there. That surprised me. I hadn't known he'd be included. He was sitting in the armchair nearest the door, which I privately thought said a lot about him. Harold sat at his desk. Eleanor was on the small sofa. Tyler was in the corner, on his phone, which he put away when I came in. "Mia," Harold said. He sounded tired. The stroke had aged him faster than any of us wanted to acknowledge. "Sit down." I sat. I placed my 3 bound reports on the table in front of me.
I didn't distribute them yet.
"I appreciate you all being here," I said. "I've completed a full review of the estate investment accounts, and I want to walk you through what I found." I started with the portfolio history, straightforward, factual, almost dry. Where the accounts had been 3 years ago, what they'd held, what the performance had looked like. Solid, if not spectacular. The kind of conservative management appropriate for their situation. Then I moved to the 18 months after Tyler took over. I didn't editorialize. I just showed the numbers. The shift in allocation. The sector concentration. The performance differential. What the accounts had earned versus what they would have earned had the previous strategy been maintained. The gap was approximately $340,000 in unrealized losses and missed growth. The room was quiet. Junior cleared his throat. "Markets have been volatile," he said. "Any manager would have taken some losses." "These losses exceeded market benchmarks significantly," I said. I had already pulled up the comparison data. I turned a report to face him. In the same period, a standard benchmark for this risk profile returned approximately 7.2%. This portfolio returned negative 4.1. More silence. Tyler spoke from the corner. I was making strategic moves. Long-term plays. His voice had a different quality now. Less easy. "What sector did you concentrate in?" I asked. He named it. Harold looked at him. "Tyler," Harold said slowly, "isn't that connected to that project you were working on? The one you asked me to invest in last year?" I watched Tyler's face in the moment. He understood what was happening. To his credit, he didn't try to bluster. He went very still. "I want to show you one more thing," I said. I turned to the page with the trustee fees. I had highlighted the relevant lines. I placed the report in front of Harold. He put on his glasses. He looked at the page for a long time. "This is a fee Tyler authorized himself," I said. I would need to review the original trust documents to confirm whether this was within the scope of his authorization, but based on my reading of the summary documents, this amount, $12,400 over 14 months, does not appear to have been clearly sanctioned. "Tyler." Harold's voice had gone flat. It was a voice I'd never heard from him before. Not the commanding patriarch tone. Something older. Something tired and cold. Tyler stood up. "Grandpa, I can explain. Sit down." He sat. Junior had gone very quiet. Eleanor had her hands folded in her lap and was looking at me with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Not hostility. Something more complicated. Harold took off his glasses. He rubbed his face. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that felt different from every other time he'd looked at me across a table, across a holiday dinner, across 31 years of my life. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "I've been reviewing for about 3 weeks," I said. "I wanted to be thorough before I brought it to you. I didn't want to come to you with a guess. I wanted to come to you with facts." He nodded slowly. Then he said something I hadn't expected. He said, "Why did you bother? After everything." I think he meant it as a rhetorical expression of guilt, but I answered it anyway because I'd thought about it and I had an honest answer. "Because you're my family," I said, "even when you didn't treat me like I was." Eleanor made a small sound. I didn't look at her. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said. "I'm here because this is my professional expertise and because these are your assets and you deserve to know what was happening to them. What you do with this information is up to you." Junior started to say something defensive, something about Tyler being young and learning and making mistakes. Harold cut him off with one word. Enough. The room went quiet again. Harold looked at the report in his hands.
Then he looked at me.
Can you fix it?
Some of it, I said.
The concentration risk can be unwound. It'll take time, and there will be some realized losses, but the account can be stabilized. The fees are a legal question that I'd recommend you take to your state attorney. I've documented everything here.
Will you take it on? He said.
Managing it. I had thought about this moment too. I'd thought about what it would feel like, what I'd want to say. I'd imagined some version of this for years without ever letting myself fully believe it would happen. Yes, I said. On 2 conditions. He raised an eyebrow, an old habit, the patriarch's skeptical look. For the first time in my life, it didn't make me smaller. First, I said, this is a professional engagement. I'll provide a standard advisory agreement, and my fee will be market rate. This isn't a family favor. Second, I paused. I'd like my father to be included in all future estate communications. He's been left out of conversations about this family's assets for a long time. That stops. Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he said, agreed. Tyler said nothing. He was looking at the floor. In the months that followed, events unfolded with the quiet, thorough logic of consequences finally catching up. Tyler was removed as trustee. The family retained an estate attorney, a good one, not the regional firm that had drafted the original documents without enough scrutiny, and the trustee fee issue was reviewed. Tyler ultimately repaid the $12,400. I don't know all the details of the family conversation that led to that outcome. I wasn't party to it. I know it happened because Harold told me, and because Tyler has been notably quieter at family events ever since. I took over management of the investment accounts. It was not glamorous work at first, a lot of careful unwinding, a lot of reallocating, a lot of documentation. Over the following 18 months, I recovered the bulk of what had been lost, and then some. When I presented Harold and Eleanor with the first full-year performance report, showing a return of 9.4% against a benchmark of 7.1, Harold printed it out and kept it on his desk. My father was included in the estate communication as agreed. The first family meeting where he sat at the main table as a full participant, not the overflow chair, not the polite afterthought. He didn't say much. He mostly listened. Afterward, in the car, he was quiet for a long time, and then he said, I don't know how you did that. I told him, I just did my job.
He shook his head.
You did more than that. Junior has been cordial to me since. Not warm. I don't think warm is something he's capable of, not toward me, but respectful in a way that feels real rather than performed. He asks about the accounts with genuine interest. I answer professionally. It works. Eleanor, to my surprise, has been the one who changed the most. 3 months after the meeting, she called me. We talked for almost an hour. She didn't directly apologize. She's not built for direct apology, but she talked around it in circles, and eventually she said, I should have listened to you more. When you were young.
It wasn't everything.
It wasn't enough to dissolve 30 years of being looked past. But it was real, and I accepted it. Now, 2 years later, I sit across from my grandparents once a quarter to review their portfolio and discuss their estate planning. Harold asks good questions. He always was sharp, even when he was using that sharpness to look in the wrong direction. Eleanor makes tea. We talk for longer than we need to. Sometimes, at the end of these meetings, Harold will say something that circles back to the old days, to his certainty about how things should be, and I can see him recalibrating in real time, a small adjustment, a revision. It is, maybe, the most I can ask for from a man of his generation and his habits. Tyler and I are not close. We are polite. I think he's embarrassed, which is appropriate, and I think he's learned something, which is more than I expected. He's working a management role at Caldwell Trucking now, a real one, with accountability structures and oversight. Junior's idea, actually. Harold approved it. It seems to be going better. What I think about, when I let myself reflect on all of it, is the long patience of it. The years of being dismissed, quietly, without malice, by people who simply couldn't see me, and the choice I made not to become bitter, but to become excellent. That choice didn't come from nobility. It came from a kind of stubbornness, maybe. I refused to let them define the ceiling. I think about the loan proposal I brought to Harold when I was 28. I think about how it disappeared without acknowledgement. I had drafted it so carefully. I had been so proud of it. And then nothing. At the time, that silence felt like an answer about my worth. I understand now that it was only ever an answer about his limitations. He couldn't see me clearly then. He can now. It took a stroke and a financial crisis and a quiet Thursday afternoon with 3 bound reports on a table between us, but he can now. I don't expect people in your situation to wait years for that moment. My timeline was my own, and I had advantages, financial independence, professional expertise that not everyone has. But what I want you to take from this, if you're sitting somewhere right now feeling unseen by your own family, feeling told to know your place is not determined by who can see you. It is determined by you. Every qualification you earn, every skill you build, every quiet piece of preparation, that is you claiming your place. Not loudly, not dramatically,
Just surely.
my grandfather used to say that every tree knows its roots. He was right, just not the way he meant it. I know exactly where I come from. I also know where I'm going. And the view from here is very good.